Okay, so the UN General Assembly, it's basically the ultimate international fire drill, right? World leaders all converge.
Hmm.
They air grievances, announce policy, and engage in some pretty high-stakes political theater.
Absolutely. It's this really dense convergence of global priorities.
And for you, the listener, trying to navigate that chaos, like the careful critiques versus the, off-the-cuff attacks, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, it really is. And that's kind of our mission today,
Hmm.
to cut straight through all that noise.
Okay.
We're going to dive deep into what just happened, focusing on the key policy clashes, those critical geopolitical flashpoints, and the fundamental shifts in international alliances we saw.
Right.
We've pulled together reports right from the floor, synthesized them to show you what was actually said, but maybe more importantly, why those statements really define the global landscape right now.
And we absolutely have to kick things off with the U.S. President's address, Donald Trump. Nearly an hour long. Our sources noted it was, well, lengthy, largely off script, and just loaded with these pointed critiques. It was kind of the gravitational center of the week.
It really was. And the address itself was this fascinating mix, part institutional lambasting, part personal grievances.
How so?
Well, on one hand, he spent a good chunk of time questioning the UN's very purpose, criticizing its perceived ineffectiveness,
Okay.
and even went so far as to accuse the organization of financially supporting the ongoing migration crisis.
Wow. And then there were the anecdotal bits. You couldn't ignore those. That's where the off-script thing really showed.
Oh, yeah, those digressions.
We're talking tangents about, like, his crime reduction efforts back in U.S. cities, complaints about a faulty teleprompter.
Right, and didn't he pause to complain about a broken escalator right there at the
Yeah.
UN building?
He did. And there was that bizarre aside about environmental regulations where he suggested, I guess they want to kill all the cows.
So it's definitely high political theater.
Yeah.
But, it does frame the underlying policy arguments he's making.
True. And the central policy dispute seemed to be his flat-out dismissal of climate change.
Yeah, he called it the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world. Pretty blunt.
His argument, as I understood it, was that green energy policies, he called it the green energy scam, they don't actually help the environment.
He claimed they just serve to redistribute manufacturing, from highly regulated developed countries to polluting countries that break the rules and are making a fortune.
Okay, but this is where the data comes in, right? Because the factual counterpoint, it's pretty stark.
It really is. I mean, that claim gets headlines, but you have to look at the facts and the sources. The vast majority of scientists are clear. Climate change is real. It's caused by fossil fuel pollution, full stop.
Right.
But even look at the economics. His claim implies renewables are some kind of burden, but solar and wind, they've actually driven down electricity costs in the U.S. Yeah, often cheaper than building brand new fossil fuel plants.
Oh.
And that's even before you factor in subsidies. So it's arguably a financial advantage, not just an environmental one.
That economic reality, yeah, that puts it in a very different light. Crucial context.
Exactly.
So, moving on from climate, amidst all the critiques, he did lay out a couple of key policy positions. First, tariffs.
Right. He framed those not as, trade wars, but as necessary defense mechanisms for U.S. sovereignty and security.
Okay. And the second one, this seemed quite technical.
Yeah, this was maybe the most critical technical takeaway from the whole speech. He announced a new international effort to enforce the Biological Weapons Convention, the BWC.
Oh.
The plan involves using an artificial intelligence verification system to monitor compliance among nations.
AI for arms control verification.
Exactly. This isn't just like standard policy tweaking.
Yeah.
It's a really critical shift toward using advanced tech to enforce arms control. Sets a powerful, very modern precedent for international verification.
Okay, that is significant. But what made the whole day feel even more surreal was the tonal whiplash.
You mean after the speech?
Yeah. Moments after tearing into the UN for nearly an hour, he meets with Secretary General Antonio Guterres and declares the U.S. is behind the UN 100% because of its, quote, incredible potential for peace.
It's the diplomatic handshake, right after the political sledgehammer.
Pretty much.
It just illustrates perfectly, doesn't it? The UNGA is a stage for aggressive posturing, absolutely, but at the end of the day, cooperation is kind of mandatory.
Okay, so shifting from that dynamic to, well, outright conflict, the Israel-Palestine question, that seemed to dominate the assembly as a major geopolitical flashpoint.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The atmosphere was incredibly charged.
Yeah.
Especially because several Western countries, the UK included, have recently signaled they might be moving towards recognizing a Palestinian state.
And the division on that specific issue recognition, it was stark, right? Laid bare on the floor.
Absolutely stark. Solidifying these diverging global views, you had Trump on one side framing any recognition of a Palestinian state as basically a reward for Hamas, linking it directly to the conflict.
And then at the complete other end of the spectrum.
You had Qatar's Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. His critique was blistering. Called Israel an enemy to its surrounding neighbors, accused it of genocide, and said its leader was actively preventing peace.
Wow. Strong words.
Very, though he did vow Qatar would keep working on diplomacy alongside the U.S. and Egypt.
Was there any middle ground attempted?
Sort of. Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, took a conditional stance. She said she's not against recognition, but...
There's always a but.
Right. It has to be conditional on two key demands: the immediate release of all remaining hostages in Gaza and the complete exclusion of Hamas from governing the enclave.
So specific conditions, trying to create a diplomatic path forward, maybe.
That seems to be the goal, yes.
A
potential off-ramp.
But all this political debate, it felt constantly overshadowed by the sheer humanitarian reality on the ground.
Completely. The UK Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, she really brought the suffering into sharp focus, warned about consequences for generations to come. And she shared this story from a doctor. It was about having to perform surgery on a screaming toddler in Gaza without full anesthesia because of the severe aid shortages.
God, that visceral detail just cuts through everything, doesn't it? Shows you the real human cost.
It really does. And the tension, it even spilled over into the meeting logistics themselves.
How so?
The U.S. Ambassador, Mike Waltz, heavily criticized the Security Council, why now, for scheduling the meeting on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year.
Which meant Israel couldn't attend.
Exactly. It effectively excluded them. Waltz called it proof of prioritizing performance over serious efforts to actually advance peace.
Which, again, raises that core question. Is the General Assembly genuinely about solving problems, or is it more about scoring political points?
It's a constant tension.
Okay, let's pivot from the Middle East to Europe. The ongoing friction between NATO and Russia, especially around energy, that was another central theme, right? Mostly in those sideline bilateral meetings.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The fact that some European nations continue to purchase Russian oil remains this huge point of contention.
And Trump brought this up publicly.
Oh, yeah. Criticized those nations directly for, in his view, continuing to fund Putin's war chest. He even suggested he might personally call up Hungary's Viktor Orban to try and convince him to stop buying.
A personal intervention.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
And, it's a valid strategic critique, even if delivered almost like a personal threat.
How did Europe respond?
Well, the European response shows the complexity. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen actually publicly agreed with Trump, said he was absolutely right about the issue.
Really? She agreed?
She did. But then she added context, stressing Europe's progress. Massive cuts in Russian gas and coal imports already made. A proposed 19th sanctions package on the table.
So, acknowledging the problem but defending their actions.
Pretty much. She conceded they need to move faster to stop filling Putin's war chest. So there's unity on the goal, maybe, but clear divergence on the speed and methods.
Got it. And beyond energy, there was talk about direct military risk, too, wasn't there? Airspace violations.
Yes, very charged. Trump stated he believes NATO members should shoot down Russian aircraft if they violate their airspace.
Wow, that's a significant escalation. Did he commit the U.S. to that?
No, importantly, he stopped short of committing the U.S.
Yeah.
But the statement itself is escalatory.
And this came up just as NATO was discussing recent incidents.
Exactly. Perfect timing. Or maybe calculated timing. NATO officials were meeting about recent Russian airspace violations over Estonia and Poland.
What was the assessment there? Accidental or deliberate?
Mixed views. The top U.S. general in Europe offered a more, let's say, measured assessment, suggested the Estonia violation was likely accidental, but reckless, put it down to inexperienced Russian pilots, maybe insufficient training.
But the countries on the front line, Estonia and Poland, they see it differently.
They do. They argue that, whether it's pilot error or not, these repeated violations show Moscow is increasingly willing to take risks, to provoke the alliance, forcing NATO jets to scramble again and again.
It really highlights that gap, doesn't it, between a, detached intelligence assessment and a nation's immediate feeling of being threatened.
A huge gap. perception versus analysis.
So looking beyond those major conflicts, the UNGA always reveals these little shifts in other key relationships too, things that could impact global stability down the line.
That's right. It's not just about the big headline conflicts.
Let's turn to Asia for a moment. South Korea. President Lee Jae-myung spoke.
Yes, he did. Spoke about restoring mutual respect with North Korea, and he made what seemed like an important diplomatic clarification,
Which was?
reaffirming that South Korea respects the North's current system and, crucially, will not pursue reunification by absorption. That's a significant signal to Pyongyang.
Okay. And staying with that region, but focusing on human impact.
Yeah.
Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska, she delivered a pretty devastating message.
Heartbreaking, really. She laid out the numbers on children taken to Russia.
What did she say?
She warned the international community that at the current rate children are being returned, only about 1,625 brought home so far.
Okay.
It would take 50 years. 50 years to bring home all the Ukrainian children taken since the invasion began.
50 years, that figure alone? It's staggering. It should shock everyone into action.
You'd hope so. It's hard to comprehend.
Moving continents now to the Americas, there was some classic diplomatic mixed messaging around Brazil, wasn't there?
Ah, yes. Diplomatic whiplash again. The U.S. recently hit Brazil with a 50% tariff, a major economic move.
Right. But despite that,
Trump mentioned having a brief, 20-second meeting with Brazil's president, Lula da Silva, claimed they had excellent chemistry, even agreed to meet again.
excellent chemistry while slapping on tariffs.
Exactly. And that excellent chemistry contrasted sharply with his simultaneous public claim that Brazil's economy is in trouble and will fail without U.S. trade cooperation.
So maintaining two completely opposite stances at the same time.
It shows how leaders can use the UNGA setting to manage bilateral relationships alongside public, sometimes antagonistic, posturing. It's all part of the performance.
And finally, we also saw the UN platform being used very directly for, well, domestic political points, endorsements and attacks.
Absolutely. Trump gave his full endorsement to Argentinian President Javier Milei for re-election, praised him, claimed he inherited a total mess, but has brought stability.
So using the world stage for a domestic political nod.
And conversely, using it for international political attacks, too. He falsely claimed London was moving towards Sharia law under its mayor, Sadiq Khan.
Which prompted a pretty sharp response.
Oh, yeah. Khan's spokesperson didn't mince words, called the comments appalling and bigoted, and pointed out factually that London is statistically safer than major U.S. cities.
It just goes to show the UNGA isn't only about global policy, it's a backdrop for international political messaging, often aimed squarely at voters back home.
Precisely. And he wrapped up his remarks on religious liberty by calling for the protection of Christianity, describing it as, quote, the most persecuted religion on the planet today.
So the whole spectrum. From nuanced AI policy announcements to highly charged, sometimes false, political rhetoric, all happening in the same room on the same stage.
It's really quite something. We've covered enormous ground today, haven't we? From the complexities of energy sanctions and the terrifying possibility of accidental airspace violations to the long-term trauma facing children in Ukraine, the immediate suffering in Gaza. The sheer range of issues is overwhelming. And it's all punctuated by this dramatic, often very personalized rhetoric.
So boiling it down, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've seen world leaders use this platform for everything, really. Announcing specific technical policy like that AI verification for the BWC.
Right.
Making highly conditional diplomatic offers like Italy's position on Palestine. And of course, launching sharp political attacks at opponents, sometimes half a world away.
A real mix.
And we held up that story, that gut-wrenching story of the doctor operating on a toddler in Gaza without proper anesthesia, and contrasted that with, disputes over broken escalators and claims about climate cons.
The contrast is jarring.
It is. So the provocative thought we want to leave you with is this. How do world leaders truly balance these things? The immediate, desperate humanitarian crises, the kind that demand specific, urgent action right now, how do they balance that with the long-term geopolitical strategies, the political theater that so often dominate the UN stage?
Yeah, what specific tangible outcomes, beyond just the rhetoric and the posturing, does the UN General Assembly actually compel? Does it force action?
It's something to keep thinking about, something to keep exploring.